Hello and welcome back to the weekly Education Pulse.
Yes, after a brief summer break, we're back, refreshed and ready to bring you the latest from the world of international education.
While we've been away, the sector hasn't stopped moving and there's plenty to catch up on. From schools launches to acquisitions and new policy updates and strategic partnerships, we've got a packed episode for you.
So whether you're easing back into the term or still soaking up the last bit of summer, let's get you up to speed on what's been happening around the world in international education. We begin in Japan, where Gordonstoun, one of Britain's most prestigious public schools, remember that means independent, is set to establish a new campus in Wakayama City.
For this landmark move, Gordonstoun now joins Harrow, Malvern and Rugby and represents a growing demand in Asia for holistic, character-driven education, something Gordonstoun is famously known for, especially with its links to British royalty, having been the school attended by King Charles.
Exactly, it's also a notable example of reverse flow. Typically, we see Japanese students attending boarding schools in the UK, but this move signals confidence that there's now a viable premium market within Japan itself for such schools to establish a local presence.
The new school will bring Gordonstoun's ethos, one that blends academic rigour with outdoor learning, service and leadership. Right in the heart of Japan's education landscape, it could also set a precedent for other UK independent schools looking to expand into Asia in a more culturally embedded way.
Definitely one to watch. And now from the hills of Wakayama to the Great Lakes of East Africa, we're seeing very different models, but the same underlying trend, a growing appetite for educational innovation and internationalization.
That's right. According to a recent piece by Nation Africa, East Africa, particularly Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, are seeing increased demand for globalised learning, with more families actively seeking international curricula and bilingual learning environments.
Yeah, the growth is being fueled by a rising middle class, greater awareness of global education pathways, and a shift in mindset. Parents are no longer just looking for a brand name, they're looking for future focused, flexible, and globally aligned options.
Schools are responding with everything from Cambridge to IB programs to franchise partnerships and hybrid learning models. And what's interesting is the growth emphasis on local global balance, integrating East African heritage, language, and identity into a globally benchmarked education.
It's also worth noting the investment side. We've seen new players entering the region, including regional groups and international operators, particularly around Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, and Kampala. But the opportunity for growth is clearly being recognized, and so is the potential for East Africa to become a regional hub for education.
Another trend to watch, the expansion of boarding options and schools building new campuses in response to waitlists and capacity constraints, not unlike what we're seeing in other parts of the world.
Yeah, so whether it's Tokyo's public innovation or Kenya's market-driven growth, it's clear the internationalization of education is not just a Western or elite phenomenon, it's truly global.
And speaking of internationalisation, let's head north to Finland, where a quiet but significant change could signal a seismic shift in global education mobility.
Yeah, from August 2026, Finland will begin offering English medium education across its public school system, a move aimed at attracting more skilled foreign workers, particularly from countries like India.
This is interesting. Finland has long been hailed as a global education leader, but the system has traditionally operated in Finnish or Swedish. By embracing English, they're actively positioning themselves as an education destination for international families.
Exactly, and it's part of a broader strategy to address workforce shortages and bolster their economy with skilled migration. Education is a key draw for families relocating, and offering globally accessible public schooling in English removes a major barrier.
What makes the story especially compelling is the contrast it presents. In Japan, we saw local governments creating new international schools. In Kenya, private schools are leading the charge. And in Finland, it's the state system which is evolving to meet global talent needs.
Yeah, it also raises some interesting strategic questions. Will other countries follow suit? Will international schools in Finland now face new competition from public institutions? And how will this shape the global education map moving forward?
Either way, Finland's announcement is a clear example of how education policy is being used not just to shape students, but to shape society. Now, let's move to Southeast Asia, and this time it's not about expansion, but a potential closure.
Yes, a worrying development in Vietnam where the American International School Vietnam is facing a closure proposal. The school located in Ho Chi Minh City has been given a deadline by authorities to rectify multiple violations or risk being shut down altogether.
According to the Ho Chi Minh City Department of Education and Training, the school has failed to submit financial reports and now has not provided adequate documentation to prove its long-term viability. Concerns have also been raised about staff salaries and other contractual obligations.
Yeah, this is a stark reminder that compliance and transparency are non-negotiables in the international school sector. Regardless of reputation or history, schools operating in any country must maintain clear alignment with local laws and reporting expectations.
And while the school has submitted a request to transfer its investment license to a new entity, it remains to be seen whether the government will accept that proposal or proceed with closure.
And if the school does close, it would be a major disruption for its student body and could potentially impact confidence in the wider international education ecosystem in Vietnam.
We'll definitely be keeping an eye on this one. It's a story with real implications for governance, investor trust, and family confidence.
And to wrap up our news this week, we're seeing a surge in demand for one of the world's most recognized qualifications, Cambridge International Education.
That's right, according to a recent release, student entries for Cambridge qualifications in Southeast Asia and the Pacific have increased by 18% year on year. That includes strong growth in countries like Indonesia, the Philippines, and New Zealand.
Yeah, the Cambridge IGCSE remains the most popular qualification across the region, and the flexibility of the curriculum combined with its international recognition is making it an increasingly attractive option for both new and established schools.
And what's also interesting is how these figures reflect broader regional trends. Many of the countries we're seeing a rise in Cambridge enrolments are also experiencing international school growth, middle class expansion, and rising demand for globally portable education.
Absolutely. It's not just about curriculum choice, it's about academic mobility, university pathways, and trust in international credentials. And clearly, Cambridge is still winning a large share of that trust.
So, whether you're a school operator, a supplier, or policymaker, it's worth noting just how much traction Cambridge still holds and what that means for the future strategy in the region. All right, that's a wrap on the news this week, but stick around because coming up next, it's time to head behind the scenes for our favourite segment.
That's right, it's time for the business behind the school, where we uncover the operational and financial gears that keep schools running. You don't want to miss it.
Most people think that school risk is about kids falling in the playground, but the real vulnerabilities, they're often buried deep in operations where no one's looking until something goes wrong.
Yeah, I've seen schools with a single person handling payroll, accounts payable, and bank reconciliations. No oversight, no approvals. That's not really efficiency, is it? That's a fraud case waiting to happen.
Absolutely. And that's why segregation of duties really matters. You need checks and balances, a second pair of eyes, internal audit. It's not bureaucracy, it's protection.
Yeah, and then there's cybersecurity. Your payment systems, your student records, family data. Schools are real targets. And if you don't have two-factor authentication or a response plan for a breach, you're already behind.
Legal risks are another blind spot. Schools sign contracts with vendors that aren't properly reviewed, or worse, verbal agreements with no paper trail. One slip up and you're facing a lawsuit or reputational damage. That's not to mention the potential lawsuits with staff for contract breaches or wrongful management practices. And even parents can bring a lawsuit or two to your door if you're not careful.
Yeah, certainly something that's caused quite a bit of stress and anxiety during my time in leadership. And then let's talk about physical risk. Emergency planning is often a tick box exercise, but when something real happens, a fire, a flood, even a lockdown scenario, schools scramble. Business continuity plans need to be practiced, not just printed.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that quieter stuff as well, the key person risk. What happens if your facilities manager resigns mid-year, or your head of admissions, the one with all the relationships, leaves tomorrow?
Or even being dependent on a single supplier for uniforms, IT support, transport. If they fold, your whole operation's exposed.
The school that I worked with didn't realise that their insurance coverage was 10 years out of date. And when a major equipment failure hit, they weren't even covered for half the cost. No risk register, no accountability.
Yeah, that's the real message. Map your risks. Financial, legal, operational, reputational. Don't wait until something breaks to start asking questions.
And that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the Weekly Education Pulse.
If you found today's insights valuable, from curriculum shifts to regional growth trends, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.
And if you're in the education space, whether you're a school leader, investor, teacher, or just curious about global trends, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. What stories are resonating with you most?
And we're back next week with more headlines and another deep dive into the business behind the school. Until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.